Coming up on Oakdale Update, we'll learn about a report on drinking water in Oakdale. We'll find out about improvements on County Highway 13, and we'll preview some upcoming events. Stay tuned. Oakdale Update is straight ahead. Hello and welcome to Oakdale Update. I'm your host, Frank Orsello. This is the City of Oakdale's news and information program about your community. In the mid-2000s, some public and private drinking water sources in the East Metro were found to be polluted with PFCs. Since 2008, the Minnesota Department of Health has tracked blood levels of PFCs in people who live in the East Metro. Program Director Jessica Nelson is here today to talk about results from the PFC biomonitoring project, which tested blood levels of PFCs in over 300 East Metro residents. Jessica, we got through that. Thank you for joining us on Oakdale Update. Okay, Jessica, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Jessica. I work with the Minnesota Department of Health, and we have a program called Minnesota Biomonitoring Chemicals in People, where we do different projects and programs that test people's bodies for different types of chemicals.
Okay, but about yourself. Tell me about yourself, your background, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I'm an epidemiologist, a long word. I got my training in environmental health and epidemiology on the East Coast at Boston University School of Public Health. I have a PhD. I've been with the Minnesota Department of Health for about 5 years, working on the same program that tests for different chemicals in people's bodies.
Okay. Now, you're working on this project on the East Metro area. Are you working on other projects too at the same time?
Yeah, so our program, Minnesota Biomonitoring, we have a few different projects that are going on right now. We're working on the PFC project. We also are working on a project that is measuring different metals that might cause harm in babies' development in pregnant women and their babies. We're looking at mercury, lead, and cadmium. Right now in Twin Cities area women, but we hope to expand that work in the future. And all of this work is sort of part of a larger vision that we have of tracking different chemicals in different Minnesota communities to see, are some chemicals going up, are some chemicals going down, are levels higher in some groups, are there some groups that we need to work a little more with about different types of chemical exposures. So it's sort of part of this larger Minnesota biomonitoring program that we have. Okay,
so let's talk about the water problem in Oakdale. Yeah. How did this first come to light? How did you people get involved with this?
So this was before my time at MDH, but there was water testing that was done that discovered there were PFCs, perfluorochemicals, in drinking water that people in the East Metro were drinking. And that was sort of the first sign, I think, that there was an issue, and this was back in the mid-2000s.
Let me ask you this. Did they just test it? I mean, do you periodically test water all the time, or is this?
Yep, there's definitely ongoing water testing, but there's an issue of developing new methods. So testing for a new chemical, you kind of have to have a way to do that in the lab. So you have to have sort of the new methods that come online that can test for new things.
Okay. So get back to the answer there.
Yeah. So water testing was being done, and it did find that there were drinking water contamination with their. PFCs is a larger class of chemicals, so there are a lot of different types of PFCs, and they're able to test for, in our project we test for 8 different PFCs, but I think they found a number of different PFCs in the water, and they started feeling concerned about what might be the source of those, so they sort of did a whole investigation project about how are the PFCs getting into the water, and they were traced back to dumping sites in the area from the 3M company that had been dumped there legally at the time, but since then concern had grown about this class of chemicals. We know they are pretty persistent in the environment. They stay in the environment for a long time, and they also can get into people. That's also what was starting to be discovered, was you can measure them in people's bodies, and they stick around.
So what would the damage be to a person if you ingested too much of this?
Well, that's still a really active area that scientists are investigating. The concern certainly started with testing that was done in animals that found different types of health effects. effects on different organs, some thyroid effects, different tumors, some liver effects. As far as the health effects on people go, it's still an open question. Scientists are working really hard, doing a lot of different studies, but at this time there isn't conclusive evidence.
Okay, so getting back to the discovery of this,
yep.
How many communities were in the East Metro area, as you put it?
Yep.
How many were affected by this?
Well, so the primary communities that we've worked with are Oakdale, Cottage Grove, and Lake Elmo. There is water contamination in some other parts of the area, but I think the drinking water levels of concern were primarily in those areas. That's where the public health community and others came together to figure out what is the intervention, what is the change that needs to happen to clean up that water and get the water levels to what we think is a safe level for people to be drinking.
Okay, so these were pretty much traced back to 3M companies in their dumping, right? Is that correct?
Yep.
But as you said, it was legal to be dumping
Yep.
it at the time.
Yep.
So what was done at those dump sites? What they do there?
A lot of work has been done to clean up those dump sites. They have excavated a lot of soil. They have, in some places, I think, put a lot of lining in the same locations before they put the soil back in. They've done work to clean up the water itself. So a huge amount of work has been done to clean up the sites. The big change in intervention that our project has been looking at was at the point of the water treatment plants. So in the city of Oakdale, with funding by 3M, I should say, very large carbon filtration units were put into the water treatment plant, so they did a much better job of getting the PFCs out of the water. Mm-hmm. And then in some of the other communities like Lake Elmo and Cottage Grove, where there was more reliance on private wells, and we knew that some of the levels in those private wells were too high, folks were either given carbon filters for their home systems, or it was paid for them to be switched to city water supplies that had treatment.
Okay, let's go back to the PFCs. Where do they come from? What did 3M, how are they contributing to this dumping site? How do PFCs get into the dumping sites in the first place? So
PFCs are very useful chemicals. They're used really widely in commercial products. They help things resist oil, water, and stains. And they can be in the product itself, they can be part of the waste that's produced when you make the product, but they were part of sort of the natural waste stream of 3M, and they were in those dump sites, and the PFCs leached out of the dump sites and got into the water. But PFCs, the way we think that people get them into our bodies is it could be contaminated drinking water in places where there is a site like we have here, but also through food and through use of consumer products. So they're everywhere. They're what we call these ubiquitous contaminants. There are a lot of different ones, and they're in a lot of different products. And we do know that everybody actually does have exposure to PFCs. I mean, we all have PFCs in our blood. We know that from national data.
Okay. Now you're talking about the filtering and the filtering system and the filters. 3M paid for all that. Is that correct?
Yeah.
They have been very good neighbors. Would you not say they've risen to the occasion?
I believe they've been instrumental in the process of dealing with this problem of the PFC.
So then, how did the MDH get involved with it? And then I'm just curious to know who pays for this. Is this just come out of your regular budget? I mean, this is just what you do, or is 3M or anybody else helping to pay for the studies and that kind of thing?
So there are different parts of MDH, of course. There's some groups in MDH who deal with the water testing, so there is still ongoing water testing that happens very regularly for the PFCs. The biomonitoring projects are sort of a different part of MDH, but it's all state funded. And the way the biomonitoring has worked, it's actually been state legislations that's been passed to say we would like biomonitoring of PFCs in these communities. So it's been a few different state bills that have passed to fund the biomonitoring projects.
So in other words, if something was found up in the Iron Range, say, you would still be involved in that, correct?
Yep.
And it'd be into your regular budget, right?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, sometimes specific bills are passed about a specific issue.
Okay.
And we actually don't have ongoing funding for the PFCs at this time.
Okay.
But it's sort of been put in as part of the legislation process to keep doing the biomonitoring.
All right, so as a disclaimer, I lived in the neighborhood where there was a dump site about 3 blocks away. So I have been getting tested, the blood test at, about every month or so, every 6 months maybe I've been tested.
The way the projects have worked is there have been 3 projects. There was one in 2008, 2010, and now the third one was in 2014.
And my results have always been normal. Everything has been fine. And I'm assuming that that's happening to more other people. Is that correct? That were being tested?
Yeah, so right, the results from our biomonitoring projects have been very good news, we think, for the community. Basically, the third round of testing that we've just done and that we're reporting results on now, we tested PFCs in 2 different groups of people. We tested them in a group of longer-term residents from Oakdale, Lake Elmo, and Cottage Grove, who we know drink the contaminated water. And what we've seen over time in those 3 different time points we have is that the levels are coming down just as we'd expect them to. So in the 6 years, I think the numbers were that they declined from 35 to 60% because there are different PFCs. So that was a good news finding, that the levels are coming down as we hoped they would. We also, this was new for our third project, we also tested PFCs in a group of residents who were newer to Oakdale. So they had moved in after all the efforts were made to reduce the PFCs in water. After 2006 was the date. And we wanted to see if their blood PFCs were more sort of like the US background or average levels. So we had about 150 of newer Oakdale residents as well. And we did find that that was the case. Their levels looked very similar to the US average levels. We could also look and see if the number of years that those newer Oakdale residents lived in Oakdale was related to their PFC levels, and we found that it wasn't. So that was kind of further confirmation that these efforts that were made to reduce the PFCs in drinking water have worked. They've been bringing down the blood levels in these older residents, and it does not look like newer residents have unusual exposures to PFCs.
That's good to hear.
Yep.
Okay, now private wells were in Lake Elmo were quite a concern. Obviously, you can't treat that unless you say it in filters. But what else did you people do about that? So or the 3M or whoever was involved?
Yep. So it was the Department of Health, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and 3M was also involved with funding. They in Lake Elmo in particular, where they converted people to the city water system, so they paid for that hookup to the city water system. But there were cases where homes got these, nice carbon filtration units on their home system.
There were a few lawsuits. I think some of the residents in Lake Elmo, in particular, if I remember correctly, slapped 3M with a lawsuit. Now, do you know anything more about that? How that's
I don't know the latest on that. From what I know, they didn't go anywhere, but I don't actually know what the latest.
Because there was no evidence that they were being affected by it. Is that correct?
I can't really say what the details were, but presumably if they didn't carry on,
it didn't go anyplace anyway. So, all right. So now let me ask you: should any local resident, even as we speak, should they be concerned about drinking their tap water?
No, I think that's what this project really does help us with, is provide the good news that the efforts that were made to filter the PFCs out of that water have worked, and that the tap water, the Oakdale City water, is now very well below the health limits that the Department of Health sets. So I don't think residents need to be concerned about drinking their tap water. That
is very good. We are out of time right now, but I want to thank you for joining us on Oakdale Update.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Jessica. It's time for a short break. We'll be right back with more of Oakdale Update in just a minute.
Hello everyone, I'm Paul Anderson, host of North St. Paul Notes on Channel 16. North St. Paul Notes is a monthly show that will keep you up to date on the news and events that are of interest to the residents of North St. Paul. This month we're going to visit with the City Manager of North St. Paul, Jason Zemer. So make sure you don't miss the February edition of North St. Paul Notes right here on GTN Channel 16.
Welcome back to Oakdale Update. County Highway 13 is a major collector roadway which provides access to businesses, residents, and neighborhoods. Washington County, in cooperation with the cities of Oakdale and Lake Elmo, is initiating planning for the rehabilitation of County Highway 13 from County Highway 14 to County Highway 35 due to pavement deficiencies and other safety concerns. With me now is the Washington County Traffic Engineer, Frank TICKNOR. Frank, thanks for joining us today on Oakdale Update.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We went through that. That was a tough read there.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I am a civil engineer by trade, graduated from the University of Minnesota. I am also a professional engineer, kind of one of the requirements of my position. I work for Washington County Public Works. And we manage all the highways, county highways throughout Washington County.
Okay.
I am a project manager, so I'm managing a number of these types of projects, but I'm also a supervisor within our transportation division.
Okay. Now, in this particular project, is that the only one you're working on right now, or do you have a couple other on the...
No, there's at least, I am managing about 6 of these types of projects. They're in varying degrees of completion.
Okay, let's be sure our people know what we're talking about here.
Sure.
Give me all the definitions of the streets names on County 13.
The full scope is Ideal. So County Road 13 is also referenced as Ideal Avenue on the south, up to Olson Lake Trail on the north, and the scope of the project is from County Road 35 on the north down to County Road 14 at the south.
How did County Road 14 is Highway 5, correct?
It used to be Trunk Highway 5, and that was a MnDOT facility. But in July of 2015, so about a half a year ago, Washington County took over ownership of Trunk Highway 5, and now it's referenced as...
So it's a county road now?
Now it's a County Road 14, correct.
I get it. I was wondering about that sign every time I passed by there. I was wondering why that is.
Now Washington County manages that road.
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go. Okay, so again, we're talking about County 13, Olson Lake Trail, and Ideal Avenue for those of us. All right. I drive this road every day to and from work, and it's a beautiful road, but it is outdated. There's no question about it. So this project is going to run from 50th Street all the way down to former Highway 5, correct?
Right.
All right, let's start with the need. Why does this road need to be upgraded and redone?
Yeah, so there's a number of deficiencies, as you mentioned, pavement being the number one. It's a rough road, it's an old pavement with potholes, cracks, and so the ride is very poor, and that can cause some safety concerns. In addition, there's a lack of drainage associated with the road, so there's no curb and gutter, and there's some ditches, but they come and go. There's not ditches everywhere, and the water that goes to those, they might not be large enough to handle the water that comes off the road. So
that's just one of some of many. Let me get into some specifics here, and you tell me about them. Let's talk about sight lines. What does that mean, and what do we do about that?
Mainly sight lines, what we look at is our intersections. So for instance, on the north end at the intersection of County Road 13 and County Road 35, it's a T intersection. And if you're...
Or County 15, right? Or
50th Street.
50th Street, okay, yes.
Yeah, I always reference as the county facility.
Yes,
but yeah, there are local names to these roads. So if you're stopped at the T intersection there and you're looking to the west, you're looking up a hill, slight hill, and there's some shrubs and trees that have overgrown on that south side of the road on 50th Street. That makes it difficult to see for a driver. So oftentimes they have to eke out into the intersection to try and see, to make sure a car isn't coming, and then go. So those are some sight line issues that we want to look at, maybe pulling back some of those trees.
And as I say, I drive that every day. We come to that corner, and the road runs this way, and this one comes this way. So the people coming up, heading west, and going to make a turn, it's a big turn because you're crawling out. That's a very good one. Yep. All right, the pavement and shoulder width. Let's talk about that.
Sure. The pavement lanes, the lanes out there, the width of the lanes are about 12 feet either direction. That's about a standard pavement width for driving lanes. But the shoulders are very narrow out there, and they're crumbling. At some areas there's 4 feet, but sometimes there's only a couple of inches because it's crumbled or broken off. We'd like to have at least 6 feet of pavement on the shoulders.
Is that for parking? I mean,
it's for a disabled vehicle, really. Yes. So if a car breaks down or if a police officer has to pull somebody over, there's a space available for those. And it also can be used for other reasons, pedestrians, bicyclists, possibly. So we'd like to have a more robust shoulder out there. So here's an opportunity for us to get that in there.
Okay, so the current needs, current and future needs of driveways and that kind of thing. Talk about the driveways on that road. That's a
absolutely
problem, isn't it?
Yes, this is this isn't just a county road. This is a residential area for everybody who lives right off of here. So we have to be very mindful of the driveways, everybody's driveways. I mean, if you think about the topography of the area, basically we cut a road in to a side of a hill. So on the west side, houses are up from the road, and on the east side, houses are down from the road. So that makes it very difficult to rebuild a road. But we have to be mindful of all the driveways and yards. You know, there's big, beautiful trees out there. We know this is has a rural character that we want to protect.
That's very good. It is a pretty street. I mean, it looks like I went to one of your meetings, and the lady director, whoever she was saying how they want to keep that rural look if possible, but I don't know if that's going to happen. Okay, then that brings us to the next one, the erosion and stormwater. Now, it seems to me that when it rains, that water just runs right down, especially on the east side, runs down into people's, I think, their houses, certainly their yards. Okay, so storm sewer, how would you, what's the story on that?
So when this road was built, we didn't have the same type of regulations that we have today. So what happens today, based on the original design of this road, is a lot of the water, like you mentioned, flows across the road on the east towards Olson Lake, and it flows down some yards, and it causes erosion. I've met with a couple of residents who have shown me the erosion that happens every spring and summer down their yard that they have to repair on their own. And then, of course, that water is going right from the road right into the lake, which is an environmental concern. So now when we rebuild roads, we have to meet current regulations, which tell us that we need to capture all that water, bring it to a facility where it's filtered out, it either evaporates or goes into the ground. So those are the types of things that we have to try and build into this road.
You know, I'm thinking on the west side of the road, it maybe isn't as big a concern as the east side of the road. Is that correct? So how are you going to stop that water from going into these people's yards and eventually into the lake?
So that's what we're looking at alternatives right now, and we're looking at two ways that we capture water: ditches or curb and gutter. Ditches take a lot of space. You have to go down, have a bottom, and come back up. Curb and gutter captures the water right at the edge of the road, then it goes into a storm sewer. So we're looking at where we can fit those two types of designs and how it fits within the area, homes, trees, what kind of impacts they have. So that's what we're studying right now. Okay,
of all the projects you're working on, is this one, it looks like there's horrible problems on this one. I mean, I suspect, and I don't know, I'm sure you've been meeting with people, not everybody's happy or will be happy when this is all done. Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, there's typically not one silver bullet design that solves everybody's concern and need. But we do this all through the county. And like I said, I have 6 of these, and they all have their own challenges. So this is what we do at Washington County. So we have a lot of tools in the toolbox to solve these types of problems. So this is a unique area, but we have good tools to solve the problems.
That's good to hear, because I'm going to be attending all the meetings as much as I can, and because I enjoy this, and I'm just curious to see how you all going to make this work. But anyway, the other thing is a sanitary sewer that's going to be installed. Is that correct?
Yes, the city of Lake Elmo, so this is a border road, so on the west side is Oakdale, on the east side is Lake Elmo. There's residents on the east side that are interested in sanitary sewer hookup. So there is, this is the opportunity now to add that sanitary sewers for those folks on the east side in Lake Elmo. There is also that opportunity for folks on the Oakdale side. There hasn't been, through the public process, there hasn't been that interest quite yet. But we're working through that.
So aren't the people on the Oakdale site, they aren't hooked up to sanitary sewer? There's not a sewer line running down 13?
Yeah, let's talk about, there's a lift station, it's an Oakdale lift station actually, about midway through the project limits. And there's a number of homes just to the north and a couple of homes to the south of that are hooked up to that lift station. Some on the Lake Elmo side and some on the Oakdale side. But that only goes up maybe 500 feet. There's some interest from that point to the north of added sewer for more residents north of that point. So there aren't, at that point, there aren't Oakdale, and neither Oakdale or Lake Elmo residents are hooked up to sewer.
Okay. Now, there were two things. The parking, through this whole last year, there's been several houses that were being remodeled.
Yes.
And all the workmen were there. And I mean, if you've got 5 or 6 workman trucks,
Yes.
it gets mighty dangerous. That road just seems to shrink to nothing, and it gets very, 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 very dangerous. So that is going to be addressed, I assume, correct?
Well, that's part of the analysis. It's all about how much space we have available and what we can fit in there. So we go through a process through preliminary design, which is what we're in right now, of evaluating our space and our needs. So a parking lane, we need 8 feet for shoulder.
Wow.
8 to 10 feet. We'd like to have 10 feet. So we have to look at, you know, do we have space available to put an 8 or 10 foot shoulder or a parking lane on one side or both sides? What does that mean for the whole footprint of that road? So those are the types of things that we're looking at right now.
And the other thing is a walking bicycle path. So that would be in addition to the 8 foot that you need for parking.
Right. So if you think about our 2 drive lanes, some 10-foot parking lanes, ditches, and a trail.
Oh my goodness.
It's a lot of space.
You're going to be in somebody's front yards, and aren't you? On
So that's a big part of the education process of showing folks, and that's what we do during preliminary design. We show these concepts to folks and give them an idea of what kind of space needs we have.
Oh my goodness. I'm glad they pay you the big bucks for this one. I tell you what, I just can't imagine how you're ever going to come up with anything, and make everybody happy. But we're running out of time here. I just want to ask you the last question here. What's next on the agenda? No, what's next on the agenda real quickly, and then who's paying for this?
Sure. Next on the agenda in March, we're going to have our next round of open houses. So that's our public engagement, and that's where we're going to show these developed, more detailed engineering concepts, alternatives, I should say. And so we'll have 3 concepts that we're going to show. We're working on 3 right now. So we'll present those to the public, and we'll gather feedback. We're also going to go to Lake Elmo Council and Oakdale Council, do a workshop with the councils.
Sure.
And then from there, gather information, and then move on to the next, where we'll hopefully select a preferred alternative.
Okay.
And from there, we would move into final design through the rest of this year, with the idea that this would be constructed in 2017.
2017, that's the deadline. Okay, go ahead.
As far as cost is concerned, this is a county state aid highway. So we use county state aid funds for this, which is gas tax money, for the roadway portion and a majority of the drainage. But there are cost participation policies that we follow between the county and cities. So there's certain elements that the city will take on, and then it's up to the city how they're going to pay for those elements. But the lion's share of the cost is covered by the county, but except for private utilities like sanitary sewer or water main. Those utilities are covered 100% by the cities.
Oh, they are?
Yes.
So the people, the residents, are not going to be taxed on this at all?
The residents won't be covered by for the roadway work.
Yes.
But private utilities,
yes,
those costs go to the cities, and then the cities determine how they're going to pay for that.
All
so
right,
those costs could be assessed.
Okay. Frank, we're out of time, but I want to thank you for giving us a heads up on this whole project.
You bet.
And again, I'm glad they pay you the big bucks to do this, because this is going to be a tough one. That's all we have time for on this month's Oakdale Update. For everyone at the City of Oakdale, thanks for watching.